Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, pros and cons from Donte DiVincenzo's first year in Minnesota. Why it was probably better than a lot of us felt like it was midseason. We'll also talk about Mike Conley, kind of the same thing. Why he's still valuable to Minnesota's rotation. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. I'm Ben Beecken. I am the host of Lockdown Wolves, and today on the show, we're going to continue our player review series from the Timberwolves' second consecutive season going to the conference finals. Of course, the NBA finals kicked off Thursday night. It really fun. Didn't seem like it was going to be that fun until the end. Thunder Pacers game on Thursday night, and I think a lot of Wolves fans are not exactly upset with how that one turned out. But today, anyway, I want to continue the player review series. We're going through the Wolves roster and spending about a half show on every player on the roster to this point. And today we're going to get to a couple of veteran guards for the Wolves, a couple of players who actually had a starting role that swapped between them midseason in Donte DiVincenzo and Mike Conley. So I want to unpack their seasons. DiVincenzo's first in Minnesota, Mike Conley's second full season in Minnesota. And on its face, I think, like, just if you were to poll 100 Timberwolves fans and say, did DiVincenzo have a good year or was he disappointing? And you'd say the same thing about Mike Conley. I think we'd get a pretty split answer on both of them. And I understand why, but I want to dig in and talk about why they were both really valuable. We'll also talk about the areas in which they struggled. With DiVincenzo, it may not be what you think it is in terms of where he actually struggled when it was all said and done. So player reviews of both of those guys. I'll make a case for why they're both still extremely valuable, and I think they'll both be on the team again next year. A big thank you off the top, though, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, as well as on YouTube. All right. So as we're cruising through this player review series, if you haven't been with us to this point, I'm going from the least played to the most played players in terms of total minutes. So we already did two-way players. We did end of the roster guys. I did a show on the young guys. I did a show on Jalen Clark and Josh Minot in one show. And then I did Dillingham and TJ Shannon was Thursday's show. So if you missed that, that was yesterday's. Today we're doing DiVincenzo and Conley and evaluating each of their seasons in the context of what was expected and all that. First with DiVincenzo, of course, he was acquired as part of the Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade at the very end of September last year, basically like 2 days before training camp started. And the late change of scenery, the opportunity that he was going to miss to play with the Villanova 4 in New York, that was all very weird. And his contract, by the way, like there was a lot of reporting last fall that it was essentially DiVincenzo was the sticking point throughout the summer, that the Knicks would not include Donte in a trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. The Wolves said, well, we're not going to do it if we don't get Donte. Eventually they got their way, and Donte DiVincenzo was included in the deal. And part of the reason, like, to be clear, he's a really good player, but the contract is such an incredible value. And that's one of the primary reasons why New York was hesitant to include him in the trade. DiVincenzo only had played 1 year in this 4-year deal he'd signed with the Knicks in free agency the summer prior. Year one, he was only paid like $10.9 million. This last year, he was under $11.5 million. Now this year, he'll be at $11.99 million, so basically $12 million. And then the last year of the deal, he'll be at $12.5. So there's 2 years left, and basically only 27 million total over the 2 years, which is crazy. No, not 27. I can't do math. 24.5 million over the next 2 years. That's it. And Donte DiVincenzo in year one in New York averaged 16 points a game. I mean, this is a dude that was like a legit scorer for them, 15.5 points per game for the season, over 40% from three. We know he crushed it in the playoffs with the Knicks. He had a monster second round in ultimately what was a 7-game lost to the Indiana Pacers, but he averaged 22.7 per game and shot 46% on threes in that series against the Pacers. And was really good in the first round too, averaged just 12 a game, but 36% from three, and an important part of what the Knicks did last season. And then he was ultimately included in this trade to Minnesota. I thought when the Wolves traded for DiVincenzo, I thought he would kind of be the really where the trade swung was going to be what DiVincenzo was able to do for Minnesota. My quick analysis, super quick summation of what I said last fall after the trade was, look, the Wolves get worse in a lot, and really probably on both ends of the floor, especially because of how Cat defended in the playoffs last year against Kevin Durant in the first round and then Nikola Jokic in the second round. I thought that the Wolves would lose floor spacing. I thought it would gum up the offense, and I thought DiVincenzo would potentially be the guy that swings the trade. He was almost 41% catch and shoot threes last year with the Knicks, a really good off-ball defender, and I thought on ball he would provide something. He would give something to the Wolves that they were still looking for, yet another perimeter defender coming out of last season. And remember, no Kyle Anderson, he left in free agency. It was good. The team needed another defender, and DiVincenzo had to guard some of the better opponents when he was with the Knicks and even the year prior with Golden State. But I figured, hey, with the Wolves, they've got Jaden McDaniels, they've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they've got Anthony Edwards. There's no need for Donte to have to guard, high usage rate type guys. And now that it's all said and done, and we look at the season, I actually think the area he was most disappointing was defensively. And maybe it's a little bit of recency bias given what we saw in the playoffs, but the Wolves had him guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander far too often, and SGA really kind of ate his lunch in the playoffs. I do not think Donte guarded SGA well. And of course, that's not really it's not a badge of honor, but it's not nobody guards SGA well, right? But I just thought that the Wolves could have gone differently or handled that differently. But over the course of the season, I thought Donte struggled a little bit defensively, and that was a bit of a surprise for me. This is not a guy who's he's not old. He is an age 28 season, so there should have been an athleticism issue. There should have been a breakdown issue in terms of his body, other than the sprained toe, which caused him to miss several weeks, late January through February or into February. Besides that, he was healthy throughout the season. I thought the defense was a little bit disappointing. The offense, and really, I guess overall, it was kind of a tale of two seasons with Donte, with a little intermission in the middle. What I mean by that is through January, let's see if I can get the exact date, through January 4th, which was that miserable loss to the Pacers. The Wolves had lost 3 straight. They lost to OKC in the first regular season matchup with them on New Year's Eve. They lost a close game at home to Boston. And then they lost at the Pistons by 14. And the Pistons obviously ended up being a really good team. At the time, they were hovering around 500. They had injuries. It wasn't a good loss regardless. He scored just 5 points in that game, 1 of 5 from 3, coming off the bench. And I believe Minnesota was right around 500 at that time. The next game, January 6th, Donte joins the starting lineup. Before he joined the starting lineup, Donte DiVincenzo had been averaging 9.9 points per game on just 39% from the field and 36% from outside the arc. Okay, so under 10 a game on 39-36 splits coming into the second week of January when he joined the starting lineup. DiVincenzo started the next 6 games. Over those 6 games that he started, he averaged 17.5 points on 43% shooting and 42% from outside the arc. It's only 6 games, okay? Then he sprains his big toe against the Golden State Warriors late in that game, and it knocks him out of the lineup for basically an entire month, the rest of January, and he didn't come back until February 27th. So he missed, he missed 19 games with the toe injury. He comes back from that point to the rest of the season. He averaged 12.9, so call it 13 a game on 46% shooting, 45% from outside the arc. So I realize I'm taking 39 games, 6 games, and then whatever the rest of the season was, 20 games or whatever that was. But the shooting splits increased. They improved as the season went on, and the scoring as a starter was legit. 17.5 a game on 43% from the field, 42% from outside the arc is really nice. And that was the turning point for Dante's season. I want to talk about how he closed the season, what he provided in the playoffs. And then we'll talk a little bit of lineup data. And that's how we'll segue into talking about Mike Conley as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances. Not only are they in full swing, we're already one game into the NBA Finals. In addition to those highlight-worthy performances, there's major momentum shifts and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Obviously, when it comes to big moments, Tyrese Haliburton is the guy. I think I saw he has 4, maybe it's 5 game-tying or go-ahead buckets in the final couple possessions of games in the playoffs. In the playoffs so far this year, it's crazy. Maybe you just want a live prop bet, something. Maybe it's Pacers related. As a Timberwolves fan, maybe you're pulling for the Pacers against OKC. Maybe if you just want to try a same game parlay, you might just have a read on who's heating up. Back it up with the same game parlay. It'll be a ton of fun. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so Donte DiVincenzo, a tale of 3 seasons, 10 points a game on 39-36 splits prior to injury, prior to joining the starting lineup, 17.5 a game on 43-42 shooting in 6 games prior to the toe injury as a starter. Comes back, he's primarily a bench guy, and he averages 13 a game, but the shooting's up to 46% for the field, 45% outside the arc for the rest of the year. That means overall for the season, we're looking at a DiVincenzo season where he averages just a shade under 12 points per game, only 42% from the floor, which was basically tied for his second worst overall field goal percentage in a season for his career. But he ended up at 39.7% outside the arc. If you had blind had me guess before I looked this up, prepping for the show, what Donte shot from 3, I would not have guessed 40%. I would have guessed 37, maybe 38%. He was just a shade under 40%, tied for the second best 3-point percentage of his career. And if you take the last 3 years combined, 1 year at Golden State, 1 year at the Knicks, and 1 year in Minnesota, he's 39.9% from 3. So 40% on more than 7 threes per game. Really impressive stuff. And this is a guy who is below league average his first 3 years in the league outside the arc, first 4 years in the league. I mean, as a rookie, he was 26%, 33% the year after. He's a legit 40% three-point shooter now with range and can do it at volume, as he's done, especially in New York and Minnesota. So the scoring is real. The shooting is real. Once he got the opportunity as a starter and then some additional minutes as the year wore on, he was a legit contributor offensively. I still do think the defense lagged behind a little bit. And then as we got into the playoffs, it was kind of, sort of, in a way, more of the same. The scoring was down. The shooting wasn't very good. He wasn't great in the Lakers series. He just shot just 30% on threes, just 8 points per game. I thought he played pretty well in the Golden State series, although his services weren't as desperately needed in that one. And then in the OKC series, he finally showed up from a shooting perspective, but the opportunities weren't there as much. He had a couple of bad games at bad times, which he's not the only one. The playoff performance overall was fairly pedestrian, which is interesting given the reputation he created for himself over 2 rounds with the Knicks last season. But a bit of a disappointing season for Donte, and given the way it started and given the way it finished, I think there could be some missed perspectives on just how good Donte was this year. I think he was very much a similar player to what he was with the Knicks. The only real difference in how he played is he shot a few more threes, and he played a little more point guard. We know that, right? He was initiating a little bit more offense with Minnesota than he did with the Knicks. And he just didn't shoot the ball quite as well at the rim. Or not just at the rim, but within, really actually anywhere in the mid-range. He did actually get to the rim a little bit, or not that much less with the Wolves. He shot a little bit more in the 3 to 10 foot. There were a few more floaters mixed in there, and he wasn't great there. That kind of knocked down the overall efficiency just a little bit. But I think it was very much a similar season from an offensive perspective to what he did in New York, just less volume. I mean, he was a starter for 63 of 81 games at the Knicks, and so there were more opportunities. And that's why he averaged, nearly 17 points per game with the Knicks or nearly 16 points per game for the Knicks in the regular season last year. The defense is where he took a slight step back. And I think given now a full season and an off season with the Wolves, I mean, he's been on 3 teams in 3 years now. I think a second year, he hasn't been in the same place for 2 straight years since 2020, 2021. He's played his first 3 years of his career with Milwaukee. Then he was traded to Sacramento. So he split a year with Milwaukee, Sacramento, went to Golden State for a year, went to the Knicks for a year, and now he's in Minnesota. So he hasn't played for the same team 2 straight years since 2019, 20, 2021. I think with a full season here under his belt, a playoff run with this team to the conference finals, an off season, I think Dante ends up scoring next year somewhere closer to what he did with the Knicks. I think he's more like 13, 14 a game and maintains that 40% for 3 efficiency. In terms of the lineups that Dante DiVincenzo was part of that were most successful, I thought this was pretty interesting. Obviously, the lineup he played the most with was the starting lineup minus Mike Conley, as he at times functioned essentially as a 6-man. He also joined the starting lineup in place of Mike Conley for those 6 games in January. And those lineups were actually barely a net positive. They were a plus 3.2, and they were 55th percentile offense, just 42nd percentile defense. His most successful lineups, this is super interesting. His most successful lineups that he played at least 100 possessions with, number 1 is in place of, or it's actually the bench trio. So DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, and Naz Reid, and the Utah duo, Conley and Gobert. So Conley and Gobert with Donte DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid. Those lineups in 249 possessions were a plus 24.5. And they were dominant defensively, 98th percentile defensively. And then his next best lineup was about half as many possessions, 132 possessions. And this is a weird one. Never would have guessed this. It was DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, Josh Minot, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid at the 5. Was a plus 23.7 lineup, and they were an 81st percentile offense and an 84th percentile defense. The common thread here were the best DiVincenzo lineups did not include Anthony Edwards. The best DiVincenzo lineups, some included Mike Conley, and where he was playing the 2. Some were DiVincenzo with Alexander Walker in the backcourt, with those guys essentially splitting point guard duties. But the best ones were not necessarily Anthony Edwards lineups. And I'm not saying that they can't. I mean, he did have some good ones with Ant. But I think the defensive concerns that I mentioned were at play there, because if Dante's on the ball, Ant's off the ball. Ant's not as good off the ball as he is on the ball. And Dante, I thought, struggled on the ball this season. If the roles are reversed and Ant's plugged in, that could be a pretty good team or a pretty good defensive backcourt, because Dante's a really good off-ball defender. Ant's a really good on-ball defender when he's locked in. I just think there's more variance there with their performances. And that pairing didn't work great in the backcourt this season. As I said, I think DiVincenzo has a really big season next year with Minnesota. I do not think he'll be traded. The only way he's traded is if they need another large salary that's aggregated to bring in, to grease the wheels of a deal. There's a third team that needs him in like a Julius Randle trade. I think it's possible, but it's pretty unlikely. I mean, it's a steal of a deal for Donte DiVincenzo at whatever I said, 12 million or whatever it is this year. It's crazy. That's a crazy steal for Minnesota. And I'm not necessarily advocating for him to start, but I think more minutes will lead to more production. I think he's one of those type of guys, and he's efficient too. So hopefully we get a little more Donte DiVincenzo this year. I want to talk about Mike Conley next, and we'll talk a little bit of lineup data with Mike. I want to give, I guess I can set up the contract thing now too with Mike Conley. Remember, he signed the extension a little over a year ago. So Conley's under contract for next year at $10.7 million. He is the 5th highest paid Timberwolf, which, by the way, actually that's not true. He's actually the 7th highest paid Timberwolf if you include the guys who have player options this year. Donte DiVincenzo, by the way, is one of only 4 Timberwolves that are under contract through next season, not the upcoming one, but the 26-27 season. It's only Ant, Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, and Donte DiVincenzo. Those are the only guys under contract through 2027, which is fascinating. Okay, Conley. So 1 year left for Mike Conley. He's going to be 38 years old, and there's clear signs of decline. We started to see it. It was pretty evident last season, and it kind of ran out of gas in the playoffs. The Wolves were less reliant on him, and then this year he briefly lost his starting spot in January, and was I thought pretty good off the bench. We talked about how Dante was really good as a starter, and Conley started the year in a horrific shooting slump. But he's still, you look up at the end of the year, he shoots 41% from three. It actually ended up being his third best three-point shooting year of his entire career. We're talking about a dude with 18 seasons in the NBA. And it still ended up being his third best shooting season. It's just that his best was last year, and he started this year so badly that that's what Timberwolves fans, it's easy to lock in on. He was actually really good from outside the arc. I want to talk about the other reasons why Conley was valuable for the Wolves this year. We'll do that here next as we review Mike Conley's second full season with the Wolves. All right, so Mike Conley turned in a really solid season offensively, especially given how the season started. It still was the least, actually his career lowest points per game, just 8.2 points per game. His only other time not scoring double figures per game was his rookie season when he was 20 years old with the Grizzlies back in 07-08. He averaged 9.4 points per game. It was his lowest field goal percentage ever in his career, just 40%. But again, the third best three-point percentage he's had in his career, and that allowed him to at least have a respectable effective field goal percentage. Everywhere else, offensively, it looked like a typical Mike Conley season. The assist rate was only down just a little. Turnover rate was right in line with where it's been. No real surprises there. Obviously, hasn't been getting to the line much at all the last couple of years. And now we're up to about 2/3 of his shot attempts are coming from outside the arc. I mean, contrast that. Early in his career, it was like less than a quarter of his shot attempts were coming as threes. Now it's basically 2/3, 66.2% of his shot attempts were threes this year. I thought the lack of burst was evident on the offensive end. Defensively, I thought he still competed really well at the point of attack. I thought he got through screens okay, although he now seems at least a half step slower. Off the ball, I actually thought it was more noticeable where teams could easily hunt Mike Conley and get that matchup. And he wasn't able to move quick enough to switch out of it. A lot of times he'd be stuck on an island, especially in the playoffs. Teams were hunting him pretty relentlessly. But I thought off the ball, he took a little bit more of a step back than I would have expected this season. But grand scheme of things, the Wolves offense was better with Mike Conley on the floor. There's lots of different places you can look to get on-off numbers, but pretty clearly, Mike Conley's on-off numbers were pretty important to the Wolves this season, or show how important he was to the Wolves. In fact, Conley was only behind Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in terms of the on-off net per 100 possessions. Yes, that means he was ahead of DiVincenzo. He was ahead of Ant. He was ahead of Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels. Very impressive. And we know that he really is the straw that stirs the drink for the Wolves offense. And this was a thing that was really evident in the playoffs too, is when Conley was on the floor, there was actually some flow to the offense. And when he wasn't, it often would stagnate. You look at the lineups that Mike Conley was in this season, and overall, when Conley was on the floor, the Wolves were a plus 7.1 according to Cleaning the Glass. Their defense was actually a bigger jump than what their offense is. Their defense was an 88th percentile unit with Mike Conley on the floor, and their offense was 69th percentile. Mike Conley's most used lineup is, of course, the starting lineup over 1,400 possessions. And then after that, it's that DiVincenzo lineup we were just talking about. 3 bench guys, DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, Reid, with Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley. Was just a phenomenal lineup. And then his other really good lineup, these are each 220 to 250 possessions, is the starters minus Randle plus Naz Reid. So Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Naz, and Rudy Gobert were a plus 29.4, 92nd percentile offense and 89th percentile defense. That right there is something the Timberwolves are going to look at when they evaluate the Naz Reid player option, potential extension, and the Julius Randle player option, potential extension. If Randle opts in, and I expect him to at over $30 million a year next year, the Wolves could turn and trade him and extend Naz Reid and, run this little lineup back with Naz as a starter with, again, same starting lineup, but with Naz. That was a really, really beneficial lineup for Minnesota. Again, a 95th percentile lineup, 29.4%, or excuse me, plus 29.4. They were 92nd percentile on offense and 89th percentile on defense. The defensive thing surprises me, but I guess it's got both McDaniels and Gobert and Ant and Nas are so switchable. The problems with Conley were really accentuated in the playoffs for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Like, teams were hunting him. There's not much you can do about it. And if he's not knocking down open threes, like, he's not providing as much value offensively other than kind of facilitating the offense, which is still a real thing that he does. And the offense kind of can grind to a halt without him. But in the playoffs, everything is magnified. And Conley shot 28% against the Thunder from three. He was better against the Warriors, but he was 29% against the Lakers. Overall in the playoffs, I mean, Mike Conley averaged like 6 a game across the 3 rounds. But having somebody who can play off, who can initiate the offense, then get off the ball and play off of it, and stand in the corner, catch and shoot threes, like, that's a valuable skill set. The problem is the defense hasn't held up, and we talked about this extensively over the last couple of days on the show. He's not bending the defense. Nobody's afraid that Mike Conley is going to score off the dribble. Of Conley's, like, I don't have well, actually I do. He made 9 buckets in the playoffs, 9 2-point baskets Mike Conley made, just 9. I bet of those 9, I would be willing to bet that at least 3 of them were ultimately uncontested layups because the other team was daring Conley to drive and completely not expecting it. And he would just drive past somebody and get an uncontested layup, even in the half court, because teams were convinced he was going to pass it off or just simply shoot a step back 3. And that's the lack of respect that Conley has shown by opposing defenses. And that's the opposite of what Minnesota needs. They need somebody who can bend the defense in the opposite direction. They need somebody like a Rob Dillingham, or the popular, obviously established name would be Kevin Durant, like somebody who the other team has to respect, that at least gives Ant a shot to see less doubles, or if nothing else, it's a player who can dominate when Ant is getting doubled, dominate with some consistency. And Mike Conley obviously is not that. In fact, he's somebody that teams are basically saying, like, hey, we don't want him to shoot an open 3, but other than that, like, he's not going to hurt us. And that in turn hurts Minnesota's offense. So Conley's obviously going to be around another year. I think there's a real chance he comes off the bench next year. I don't think DiVincenzo starts at point guard, but maybe he will. Again, we saw that for a short stretch before DiVincenzo got hurt in January. But expect Mike Conley to just have a slightly smaller role once again next season with Minnesota. I mean, this year, ultimately, he was, what did he average in terms of points, minutes per game? 24.7 minutes per game, which was his lowest ever in his career. And that number is going to shrink further. It's probably hovering around 20 minutes per game next year. And I think that's okay. I think he can still play a valuable role as that guy, as a 38-year-old. As long as there's an understanding that, look, he could still be a contributor to this team and not have to be overextended and not have to be the scapegoat for anything either. It's the Dillingham / whoever else creator type role that they need to figure out. And then Conley can be that veteran steady hand off the bench to help kind of calm things down. And I think that's something he did pretty well this year. I think for both DiVincenzo and Conley, it was the defensive side of the ball that to me were a little bit lacking. And then obviously hitting threes in big spots. And there's only so much you can do about that. But those were things that either of those guys did with consistency in the playoffs, which is part of the reason we all have a bad taste in our mouths talking about both of these players. In respect to the broader picture, it's an easy thing to kind of get bogged down in what happened most recently. All right. So I got for you today. I'll be back on Monday. We're going to dig into, I guess we're to the top, 7 guys now. We'll talk probably some Nikhil and one other player on Monday's show. We'll power through the rest of this player review series over the course of next week. We'll keep an eye on the finals, and then we'll start getting ready for the NBA draft. We are not far off. We are 3 weeks from yesterday, I believe, from the NBA draft, from the first round at least. So lots to catch up on there as well. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can also Follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.